structures. Do remember that your second exam, worth 50 points, about 5% of your grade, give or take, is this Thursday. Same story as before. We'll use Thursday as a review time. The form that'll take is me either bringing an old midterm or questions, or maybe going to Advent of Code or something like that, and doing some exercises. Again, it's optional, just like all lectures are optional. If you want to go ahead and use that time for actually doing the exam, that's okay too. We will have our regular hack session, of course, on that Thursday, and we have a regular lab this week as well. Same story as before, no collaboration. Make sure that you'll have midnight to midnight. It'll be 2 exercises, and it'll cover primarily string and file I/O. So string manipulations and file I/O. There will not be any structures on it, the stuff that we're covering right now. Any questions on the exam on Thursday? No? All right. Then, so to recap where we were last time, remember that we were looking at structures because we've got this book data, right? And we wanted to run several reports. One of those reports being what's the best book, what's the worst book. I want all books written by Frank Herbert, et cetera, et cetera. And we realized right away that if we were going to do this in any sort of, if we were going to do any sort of data manipulation on this, that we needed to be able to group things together and not have all these different variables all over the place for the title, for the author, their first name, last name, et cetera. And so that's when we introduced structures. Structures that support encapsulation. Encapsulation being the grouping of pieces of data that form one logical unit, right? Now, there are object-oriented programming languages that support the other 2 parts of encapsulation. Java, some of you will take the second course in this sequence next semester. We'll look at that, and that supports all 3 of these things. But C is not an object-oriented programming language. It only supports the first one, okay? We then quickly realized that any time that you have multiple pieces of data that define one thing, for example, first name and last name, immediately we put that out into another structure so that we could organize things a little bit better. That we could talk about a book's author just by talking about the thing representing an author, since we had something to represent that. And then we further broke that down into a date, which is a year, month, and a day. Right? Then we started building a bunch of utility functions that allowed us to more easily use these new structures that we made. For example, we've got a create book that if you give it, that it's a factory function that if you give it these 5 pieces of data, it will automatically create a book for you, setting all these 5 pieces of data and then returning a pointer to that newly created book. We also realized that we'll probably want to be printing this stuff out to the standard output, and maybe even to like files or to databases or to sockets or something like that. So we generalized it to have a book to string function here that the print book used. Right, all it did was call this to get a string representation of it, print it out to the standard output, and then cleaned up after it. Right, here's what it looks like. Okay. That we created a temporary string here. We formatted that string. We then created another string to hold that string, copied into it, and returned that string. Right? And then print book simply uses book to string, prints it out, frees it up, and you're done. The create book, we were using the arrow operator. So as a review there, remember that if you have a regular old structure, to access the member variables of that structure, you use the dot operator, right? But if you have a pointer to a structure, like we do here in create book, right, book star, then we use the arrow operator all over the place, right, to access member variables, okay? All right, that's where we'll pick it up from this time. So we've got the beginnings of a framework that allows us to use these things easily. Immediately I can see some improvements here. For example, we have a way to create books. We don't have a way of easily creating authors, right? So this is called basic CRUD, right? Create, retrieve, update, and destroy. Anytime that you have a structure here, you're probably going to want functions to support that structure. If we've got a create book, we might need a create author. I'll leave that to you. what I want to do is I want to create an alternative function here, right? So the create book, that creates a book instance by allocating memory for it. What if memory was already allocated for it? What if a book was already existed? We just wanted to set all of these pieces of data for it, right? So I'll describe it here. This function initializes the given book's variables, assuming that the book has already been created. Right? What that would look like, well, it initializes something, so I'll go ahead and short it to init book, right? We're going to initialize that book. In other words, we're going to assume that it's already created. You're going to give me that book. So book star B. And then all the rest of the recipe or the raw materials to create that book, to initialize that book. We're going to set that book's title, its first name, last name, release year, and ratings, okay? Let me go ahead and align this a little bit better. There we go. And then I'll just use a style here later on to fix all the alignment, because I'm actually going to change it now here. What's the return value on this thing? So if you give me a book and all the stuff that belongs in the book, and I go ahead and initialize everything, because it's a lot of work, right? It's a bunch of malloc calls, it's a bunch of strcpy calls, it's a bunch of assignments, right? It's at least a dozen lines of code, right? So I want to put that into this function, and I'm going to do the work for you. What do you expect back? You're the one that gave me the book, so should I be giving the book back? No. Well, if I'm not going to give anything back, then it could be void. What's an alternative? Int for error handling, right? If we want to do error handling. I'm going to go ahead and leave it simple for now and use void. Actually, no, let's go ahead and go with int, okay? We'll do this full function from the ground up here, okay? Let's go ahead and go into lecture, ECEN, a style book.h. There we go. Let's close it and see all that fixed now. Nice alignment, okay? Note here, again, why am I doing vertical alignments on this? If I didn't, super, super long line that you are constantly scrolling horizontally to see everything. What was the order of everything again, right? So I'm going to go ahead and vertically align it instead, okay? Now let's go ahead and actually implement this thing. So what are some errors that could occur here? If the book that you give me is invalid, right? It's a book star, right? So what would be an invalid book? If it's a null pointer, right? In fact, if any of that stuff is a null pointer, title is null, or author first name is null, or author last name is null, right? What else could there be that's wrong with this? Yeah, release year might not exist. Now, we could be talking about a book that was released in 700 BCE, or a book that's scheduled to be released in the year 3000 or something like that. So maybe there's not a very clear way of looking at an invalid year. There was no year 0, though, right? So we could check that. All right, maybe, right? Rating is less than 0, or, and then it's on a 5-point scale, so if the rating is greater than 5, then that's an error condition too, right? So there, I'll go ahead and return just a simple error code here, okay? And I won't break that up. There we go. Or. Right? Now again, you know, if you were, if you had this full, let's say, release date, then there is no February 30th, right? You could error check something like that, but at that point, no. Bring in a library to do it, right? Also, again, if you are just checking the year here, and the only thing that you can really reasonably check for it is the year 0 doesn't exist, right? That falls under Yagni. You ain't gonna need it, right? So in engineering, if you ain't gonna need it, don't do it, right? If that one test case will never actually occur in real life, maybe it's not all that important, right? So Yagni, you ain't gonna need it, don't do it, right? All right, so that's good, some good error handling there. All right, so the book already exists, so we don't have to do, say, this first line of code, right? But we do have to do all this, right? We have to initialize the title. We have to call malloc to do it. We have to strcpy the old title into the book's title, et cetera, all the way down, and then we return 0 to indicate no error. Anytime you find yourself copy pastaing, what should you do? Reconsider, right? And we have made 2 functions here, but repeated code, repeated code, repeated code, repeated code. Is there one of these functions that could call the other one to save us some lines of code? Yeah. All right, so once we've made it on line 15, then this code is repeated down here, right? What we could do is we could call init book on B, and then the rest of this stuff. Title, author, first name, author, last name, release year, and rating. There we go. And now I don't have to repeat this at all. Right? I've got fewer lines of code, or locks. Right? And I only mention that because very recently somebody posted, I don't know where, they posted some intentional cruft. All right, well, yeah, it's on Twitter here. So when you know, some incompetent billionaire who thinks they know what they're doing starts firing 50% of his workforce based on locks, lines of code, something that they did in the 80s. Right? You can tell how out of touch they are. Why? Here's their top-ranked employee. Right? What have they done? Wow, that's a lot of locks. That's a lot of lines of code. What have they done? They've written a function to add 2 numbers together. They've added dozens and dozens of lines of code to document what they did. They've added a bunch of different Yagni error handling. You ain't going to need any of that, right? This is a completely useless endeavor in just adding lines of code in order to save their job for another 6 months before the rest of it goes under, right? So don't do that. Don't do that in practice unless you're trying to save your job or something for another 6 months, right? This is much better. Don't repeat yourself. That goes into the DRY principle. Remember, DRY, equals, don't repeat yourself. All right. Okay. All right. There we go. Yeah.
So the guy that wrote all the cruft though?
Yeah.
Maybe.
His name's on it.
I can read that.
This is public. This is out there publicly.
Yeah.
Oh, what's his name? David Gray.
But I mean like that. I mean all the comments and stuff once it goes through the compiler, those are all gone, right? So
Well, technically, I think I can't be sure, but I think that this is JavaScript, so there is no compiler unless you have a just-in-time compiler or something. Now, there are utilities. If you're writing in JavaScript, there are utilities that are called uglifiers or minifiers that will go through and remove all of that stuff. So that, and even remove all of your variable names and your method names and replace them with the shortest possible word. So function A, function B, function C, right? Or variable A, variable B, variable C. To shorten it, because ultimately this code is being sent over the network, right? When you serve a web page, JavaScript is being sent just over the network, and so you want it as small as possible, even though it's not compiled. Now, on the other end, when in a browser will typically have a JIT, just-in-time compiler, and it'll compile that JavaScript code into something that is more efficiently executable. But it only will compile it once it gets it at its endpoint. Right?
so for like a web application, you'd be worried about lines of
Not really. No, I mean, this is an extreme example. You do not write this function at all. If you want to add 2 numbers together, A plus B, and you're done. Right? Now, there are some gotchas with JavaScript because JavaScript is kind of a terrible language that you have to be careful because I don't think that they call it type juggling. It's called type juggling in PHP, where you've got a string that contains a number, and then you can add that to another number, and it'll try to coerce it into an integer type or into a floating point type, and that's called type juggling. In some languages, it's just called coercion. And so maybe there is a need to check: is this, it's some basic error checking, but not like this, right? I mean, even checking is this equal to true? You don't write that. You just write it, if reverse order. Right? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, you could find there are examples like this all over the place. For example, enterprise level FizzBuzz, GitHub. So somebody just took enterprise quality coding, FizzBuzz Enterprise Edition. So there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of files here just to do FizzBuzz, that you've done before now a couple of times. I don't even know what language this is in. What is it? Java. There we go, Java. Java FizzBuzz, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of code just to do something very simple. It's kind of a parody, right? It's kind of mocking the enterprise level Yagni crap. You ain't gonna need that.
I guess like the drive toward reducing the lines of code, parts of it like parts of it I understand, but then parts of it I think, well, I want more comments because I'm new at this.
No, definitely when you're new at it, sure, right? And that's why I leave in cruft all the time, for example, let's go back and do some error handling. But at the end of the day, you take those things out because that's cruft, right? When you go back to it, if there's something that's not self-documenting, then yes, absolutely do it. But something like, I don't know, for example, these 2 lines of code. I would not put in a comment that says something like, create enough space for the title, right? The title. Be sure to include +1 for the null terminating character. This is beginner good stuff, right? That you're documenting that when you're teaching a language how to do, and then call the string libraries strcpy function. Recall, it takes care of the null terminating character for you, right? ... But I mean, even a couple of years after, on a real project, you would never write this kind of stuff. Then you'd immediately see it and you go, nope, get rid of that. Get rid of that. Those 2 lines of code, I understand those immediately because I'm now an intermediate or an expert, right? It's self-documenting. Yeah, well, not me. I mean, I'm talking about you too, right? Within a year of doing this, you'll see that as cruft, right? I mean, comments from like students in the end of term evaluations, for example, are always, in fact, I tell people to always look back and compare yourself, not to each other, but compare yourself to yourself. Say 3 months ago, or whatever it is now, 2 months ago, right? And go back and do that first homework. You'll get it done in a fraction of the time that you did, right? A year from now, you'll go back to your old code and say, that's embarrassing, right? I would never do it that way. I know much better ways of doing it now. I'm going to go ahead and redo that, and it'll take a fraction of a second to do something like that, right? So that just comes with experience, right? I mean, look at any skills-based endeavor, right? Somebody who's been woodworking or playing the violin for 10 years, right? You can't compare them to somebody who just picked up the violin and started, right? But you also apply different standards to each one of those individuals, right? That kind of here, I'll bring it up again. That kind of standard should not be from a Twitter engineer, right? And obviously it was not. He did it as a joke, either as a joke or as a way of inflating the locks intentionally, right? So no way should this come out of even a junior engineer at a major company like that. Right? Oh yeah, I mean I don't know who posted it on Twitter, but yeah, yep. That's a good way to guarantee that you get rid of your best people, is by using terrible metrics like that. I don't have it with me now, do I? No, there was a nice meme like a month ago or so on codinghumor.com or Coding Humor subreddit or something like that, where the beginner will be writing 100 lines of code per hour or something like that. The intermediate will be writing 200 lines of code an hour, right? And then over here on the other end of the bell curve, you have an expert that's writing -2 lines of code per hour. Why? Because they're getting rid of that cruft, right? You don't need this. This 10 lines of code, I can do that in 2, right? that 50 lines of code, there's a function over there to do that for me in the standard library. Cut, 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 right? That's how artists work, right? How do you know when you're done as an artist? I'm not an artist at all. How do you know when you're done? When there's nothing left to cut. Not when there's nothing left to add, when there's nothing left to cut, because then it's perfect, right? All right, again, it all goes to DRY, don't repeat yourself. It all goes to the Yagni principle. You ain't gonna need it, then don't do it. Right? Okay, so there's my initialization. Let's see. Now what I want to do is I want to go back to our demo here, and I want to start using the framework that we've built so far. Okay. First of all, I don't want to just keep track of one book. I want to keep track of the entire library because I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of reports on all this data. Whole bunch being just 3, right? But I want to keep them in an array, right? So let's go ahead and up here, let's go ahead and create an array that's big enough to hold everything, right? So if I want an array of integers, what would that look like? Int star array is equal to int star malloc size of int times however many that you want, right? Question mark here. I do not have an array of books. Or sorry, I don't have an array of integers. What do I have? I have an array of books, right? And I'm not going to call it array because it's a library, right? I've got an entire library of books. You could call this books if you wanted to. Books, right? I'm going to go ahead and go with library. Books is fine. There we go. Right? Pluralization. Why pluralized? Because it's an array, it holds more than one. Right? I don't have a book, or I don't have an integer, so I have a book, so I typecast it as a book. How many bytes does a book take? Not size of int, size of book. Right? It's the exact same stuff that you've been doing over and over and over again. It's just that now it's a defined type, right? The language knows about integers and chars and doubles, etc. It just didn't know about books until we built this type def, right? This structure, right? All right, so how many do I want? Well, here, if you recall, we're kind of cheating. Over here in the book CSV file, on the very first line, we tell you how many records there are. And over here in demo, we read that first line, and we say that there are that many records, right? So I'm going to go ahead and move this down here and kind of use that to cheat, right? Unlike, you couldn't cheat in your hack this week, right? What did you have to do? You had to go through and count the number of characters in order to create a string big enough to hold them all, +1. You had to go through and count the number of lines in order to build a 2-dimensional array to hold as many lines as there are, right? So you had to go through the thing twice. We're kind of cheating here in that we're telling you up front, there's 20 things in this file. Right? Okay. All right, once I've got it, then I can use num records here and then proceed. Right? So once I've created a book, well, wait a second. Do I need to create a book, or do I already have an array of books that exist? I already have an array of books that exist. So it's not really appropriate to call create book, because create book means that it's going to create a brand new one. It's going to call malloc. What's that thing that we just wrote that says, well, if the book already exists, go ahead and call me, and I will go ahead and just initialize everything. Init book. Convenient, right? There we go. All right, I'm not going to do that, but I am going to specify books. All right? Now be careful here. Init book expects how many books? Just one. I'm going to go ahead and set the title, the author, first name, last name, release year, and ratings of that one book. Okay. So which book do you want? I want the ith book. Right. Now, is this going to match what init book expects here? Book star. Let's reason through this first. All right. What type is what is the type of books? All right. That is a book star, right? That's how I created up here. That's a book pointer, right? So when I use the indexing, when you index, say, books sub I, it becomes what type? Just a regular old structure, a book. Right? Init book expects a book star, right? A book pointer. So is that what we have so far right now over here? books of I is just a regular old book. How do I change it into a book star so that it matches that function's expectations? How do I take a regular old variable and turn it into a pointer? Ampersand. There we go. All right. Okay, cool. Lots of lines of code here, right? Which is necessary in this case. But if you've got a lot of lines of code, or if you're doing multiple things, for example, to produce these 3 reports, I'm going to have to load it up from a file. Then I'm going to have to go through and find the best one. I'm going to have to go through and find the worst one. I'm going to have to go through and find all the ones by Frank Herbert. That sounds like 4 things to me, right? A function should only be responsible for one thing. Therefore, this is calling out to us to make 4 functions, right? And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all of this stuff and put it into a function so I don't have to worry about the details anymore. Right? Let's come over here and define what that function does, or what that function is. Book star load books from CSV. Right? File. Right? There we go. So if I'm going to load the books up from a CSV file, what do I need? I need the file, or at least the file name. You could do something like this, right? But then you're putting the onus on the calling function to open the file, do the error checking, do all that stuff. We're going to take care of that for you. You just need to tell me where the file is. Const char star file name. Just like you did in your hack this week, right? We give you the file name, you open it up, you pull out the contents, you load up the string, and then you give it to us back, right? I want this function to do all of that stuff. Again, it's from a high level, it's doing one thing. It's just loading up the books from the file. Now, when you take that one thing and you look at the details, of course, it's doing a whole bunch of things, right? It's reading in the first line, it is allocating memory, it is going line by line, it is calling other functions, etc. But in the whole, in the large, it's only doing one thing. It's loading up the books from the file. Is there anything else that we need to be told? If I load up 50 lines from the file in Hack 10, do I know that there were 50 lines in there? If I called you're the get file lines function now, right? So I want you to load up the file and give me a 2-dimensional array of strings that one to a line, each line. Right? Do I know how many lines are in the file? Nope, you do. So how are you going to tell me how many lines are in the file? With that pointer, num lines. Right? Now, this is not lines. What is it? Books. So num books. Right? I like that. Right? So again, let's document this. Loads up, loads book data from the given CSV file and returns a new array containing all the book instances. The size of the resulting array is communicated through the pass by reference variable num books. Okay? So this is going to look very familiar to what you did in this hack this last week, or that was due yesterday, I guess, right? All right. All I'm going to do is cut and paste this code and modify it. There we go. All right, let's start at the top here. Am I always going to be opening up the books.csv file? Nope. I'm going to be opening up the file name. Oops. 0. To do. Error handling. The file name could be null. The num books could be null. Right? I could open up the file, and it could be that I don't have permissions to do that, or that it doesn't exist for reading. Right? All those things could go wrong, in which case I would want to return null. Okay? Otherwise, again, I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you. Otherwise, 1,000 is probably reasonable, right? Num records there, we pull that up. I'm not doing this report in this function, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I read it line by line, right? I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my cruft now, right? I initialize the book. I'm not doing this report, and I'm certainly not printing anything out in this function. But at the end of the day, I am going to go ahead and return books. What did I forget to do? I read all 50 lines, but did I ever tell you? Oh, did I not? Oh, I opened the file. Good. Two things that I forgot to do. Right? So for close the file, what was it called? F. There we go. And what else? Tell it how many lines there are, or in this case, the number of records, right? The number of books. Right? Num books is equal to num records. I could have done that up here, by the way, right after I got that information. Right? This begs the question, why have two variables when only one variable will do? Right? You can, right? You just have to cross your fingers and make sure that you're following all the PEMDAS rules. Right? For example, if you were to do something like this, right? Num books plus plus. Is that right? Definitely not. And the only way that you know that is by pulling out your big book of PEMDAS and finding out that the plus plus is actually executed before the num books. Does that look right? Definitely not. What you're doing is saying this pointer points to memory location 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it points to the memory location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, right? You're changing what it points to. That's not what you wanted to do. That's what you wanted to take the counter, right, and increment it. 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So you would have to do something like this. Dereference and then increment. I hate having to think about stuff like that, right? It introduces failure points. I do not like playing around with pointers, right? Sometimes you have to. So in that case, do it once and do it correctly. Right? You definitely have an argument here for an additional superfluous variable because it means that you don't have to deal with the pointer more than once. Right? Okay. That looks good. Let's come over here to our demo and see how we can eliminate all this stuff now. Right? All I'm going to do is load it up. Right? So books is equal to, what did I call it? Load it from CSV or something. There we go. Load it from the CSV file. Now here I will say books.csv because that's the file that I was processing. And then I'll go ahead and give it a variable here called n, or numbooks, int numbooks. I like that better. Right. Numbooks. But numbooks is a regular old variable. It expects a pointer to a variable. So what do I do? How do I change a regular old variable into a pointer variable? Ampersand. There we go. So now I've loaded up the books. Oh, wow. Look at that. That is much more beautiful code now, right? Why? Because there's a lot less of it, right? All that detail now is encapsulated inside of this function. I don't have to worry about that ever again once I know that this works, right? I just simply load it up, and that's it. One line of code, right? Wouldn't it be great if this was built into the C language already, right? Well, you've given that present to yourself by putting it into another function. Now you have the same the same effect as before. If it were actually built into the language, you just use it. You created the function. Now it is built into the language, into your library. Now all you have to do is use it. Great. Now I want to run those reports. So 1, find the best book. Right? 2, find the worst book. Worst book. Right? And these are just according to the ratings. 3, find all books by a certain author. In this case, it's going to be Frank Herbert. Right? Okay? So let's take care of the first one here. Suggestions. I'm probably going to want to go through all the books, look at all the ratings, find the one with the highest rating, and then I'm going to want, that's the best book. Right? That's going to be at least 5, 6, 7 lines of code. What should we do? Should we write it right here? Let's make a function. I like that. Right? Make a function. Right? This function finds the best book with respect to the rating and returns ... whatever. Let's write we're designing the function now. We're writing its signature. So I'll just go ahead and call it get best book, right? Well, what's it going to need as input? It's going to need a bunch of books, right? So books, right? Books, star books, sorry. There we go. Am I going to be making any changes to those things? Nope. So what can I put in front to guarantee that? Const, or at least promise it. Do I need anything else? Well, the ratings are built into the structure now, right? How many books there are, right? If I give you an array, I always have to tell you how big that array is. If you build an array and give it back to me, sometimes you have to tell me how big that array is. Right? You didn't have to do that with like length split because the math could be done in both locations. Right? So int num books. There we go. Now here's the kicker. Returns what? The number being what? So if there are 5 books and this one right here is the best one, then what would you say? 0, 1, 2, 3, the index. Right? So I would call that get index of best book. Right? And then the return type would naturally be an integer. Right? That's one way. Is there any other better way? Or better way, not, I don't want to, more C-like way. Right? Yeah. Ah, a book star. There's the book. There's the best book over there. I'm pointing to it. Right? Go ahead and get it if you want. Do whatever you want with it. Right? Now it achieves the same thing, right? That okay, you gave me the books. I'm telling you that the 5th book is the best one. You have the index now. You can jump to that location and get it. Right? I wouldn't call this index of anymore, of course. I would actually call it get best book. Right? Which one do we want to do? Votes. This one? All right. So you're abandoning it. Well, why not both, right? We could do both. For time, though, I'm just going to do this one, right? If both of them seem useful, right, you don't have to compromise. You can do them both. Of course, you couldn't call them the same thing. You would actually have to call one of them get index of best book because you can't have 2 functions with the same name and returns a pointer to it. Okay? Exactly. That's exactly what you would do, right? In fact, then you would abandon writing all of these functions and you would write one generic function that used void pointers and comparators, which is what we'll get to after this exam. Right? Yep, don't worry about it yet. All right, get best book. What am I going to do? I'm going to iterate over the books for int I equals 0. I is less than num books. I plus plus. Right? If the ith book has a rating higher than the highest so far, ... update the best book. Right? And then return the best book. Right? Say what? Yeah, I need it. So that outlining this code like this, this is me whiteboarding it, right? Okay, now that I've looked at this, okay, I definitely need the best book, or at least the rating of the best book, right? Double best rating, right? Or something like that, right? Or maybe we'll go with your idea of int index of best. Right? And I'm going to assume that the first one is the best one, and then I'm going to look at the second one, the third one, the fourth one, always comparing it to whichever one that I found best so far. All right? So how is this if statement translated to C? Right? If the books of I dot rating, dot or arrow here, that's a good question, is greater than the books of index of best dot rating, then I've found a book that's even better. Right? Now, answer the question, is it a dot or an arrow? We use the dot operator when we have a regular old structure. We use the arrow operator when we have a pointer to a structure. So in this instance, we use a, careful, books is definitely a star, right? It's a pointer. But when I refer to one of them, it is a regular old book. So dot operator. Right? Okay. Update the best book. Well, if I'm just keeping track of it with respect to an index, then it's going to end up being I. Get rid of my whiteboarding stuff. Right? Now return the best book. Right? So books of index of best. Does that match? Remember, books is a pointer. One of them is a regular old structure. It expects a pointer to a structure. So how do I take a regular old structure and turn it into a pointer to a structure? Ampersand. Excellent. Let's see if it works. Right? I don't want to jump ahead and immediately do the next one, the next one, the next one. I want to do some ad hoc testing here. Just a sanity check. Right? Get best book. Book star best is equal to get best book of my books and num books. Right? And then let's print that out. The highest rated book, oops. Okay, yeah. Come on. There we go. The highest rated book is, and then I'm going to go ahead and end that because I don't have to format that printing anymore, do I? I have print book. There we go. All right. ECEN. Let's go ahead and make sure that everything compiles. I don't know, maybe I should have been compiling along the way here. Wall flag, compile flag, book.c. There's my library. Uh-oh. Warning, warning, warning. Let's go up. Let's go to release. Did I not spell release gear correctly? Book 99. Release year. Oh, I called it year. Sorry. There we go. Fixed. Run that again. Those are red herrings. Don't worry about them. Yep. Don't worry about those. Not all warnings are killers, right? Some warnings are, yeah, I know what I'm doing, right? Again, warnings are just lint. Are you sure you want to do that? Take a look. Yes, I'm sure I want to do that, right? Okay. Now let's go ahead and compile everything together. GCC, wall flag on book.o and demo.c. Right. Ah. I must not have gotten, yeah, there we go. I need to get rid of that stuff. There we go. Otherwise, is that it? Yep. All right, now, remember, what was the best book? At least in this data set? Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling, 2007, 4.62. Hey, cool. It worked. All right. Now let's do the next one, the next report. The next report is, what's the worst book? And now because I've invested some time and I've created this framework where I've got all these structures, all these nice little functions to help me build structures, all these functions to help me load data, I don't really have to do all that much. Right? In fact, what's it going to look like? Best book, but changed, right? The function worst book with respect to the ratings and returns a pointer to it. The worst book, right? And that's the same. Let's come over here. You're right. All I'm going to do is change, whoops, don't get rid of it. Right? The best into the worst. Index of best, index of worst, right? Index, index, index. Right? So all I did is name changes so far. Is there anything else I need to change? Yeah, the symbol, right? Oops. Less than. Whoa. Right? Applying some principles that we've already talked about. DRY, don't repeat yourself. Don't copy paste code. This seems like a lot of copy pasted code, right? This is 8 lines of code that has been copied, and the only change, other than meaningless variable names, is the direction of the less than or the equal operator. There must be a better way. That better way will be introduced after the exam, right? Using generic programming, void pointers, function pointers, and comparators, right, for searching and sorting. Right. Let's make sure it works, though. Did anybody bother looking at the data, like, and know what the worst book is? Get the worst book. Worst. Has she written anything else? Yeah. Oops. Anything good? No? Okay. All right. Well, what's the worst book? Dianetics by Ron Hubbard. Right. There we go. And that is not my rating. I would actually put it even lower, though I have not read it. But 2.33. There we go. Yeah, go ahead and do that on your own time. But his science fiction books were also terrible, so he's just a bad writer overall. Right? All right, let's find out. Let's find all the books by a certain author, a good science fiction author, Frank Herbert. Right? So suggestions. First of all, am I going to want to make a function get all books by Frank? That seems like it's a one trick pony, right? No. Get all books by author, right? I like that because now I can give it the author Frank Herbert, right? And then get all of his books. I can give it the author J.K. Rowling, get all of her books. I can give it Octavia Butler and get all of her books, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? If I'm going to give you books back, I'm going to go ahead and give you an array, right? That also means that I need to, of course, get all the books as input. I will also need the author. Right? That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be I want the author, but I want them as a pointer. So you tell me where that author is so I can jump to it. Right? We'll go ahead and keep it simple, and for variety, we'll go ahead and do it like this. What else am I going to need? Am I making my own book? What do you mean? Yes, so returns a new array containing all books by the given author. Yeah, communicates the size of the resulting array in the ... That's what the missing piece is, right? So can I call it num books? Nope, I've already run out of names, right? Again, in computer science, there are only two difficult things. One is cache invalidation, the other is naming things. So num books is the number of books in this array. How many books are in this array? Num results. That sounds good. Again, you could probably brainstorm for an hour thinking of better variable names, but then you could write it in the same amount of time and just be done with it, right? Okay. I like that in the pass by reference. Pass by reference variable num results. Okay. You've done something like this very similar a couple times now, right? If you remember back on in your lab 7 about arrays, right? Filter evens. I give you an array of integers. You go through and you count up the number of evens, create a brand new array, copy over only the evens, and then give me back that array. Right? All we're doing differently now is books. And instead of giving your criteria being fixed and divide by 2, mod 2, and then the remainder is 0, now what you're going to do is you're going to say, is this book written by that author? If yes, put it into that array. Right? Same exact problem. There we go. So my first task is going to be, well, of course, 0, to do error handling. Right? 1, I need to know how big that resulting array should be. So what do I need to do first? Iterate through the books and count how many are by the author. ... For int I equals 0, I is less than num books, I plus plus. Right? If books sub I is written by author, then count plus plus. Right? Well, if I'm going to have a counter, what do I need to do? Int count. Is that enough? Nope. What does it start with? Dead beef. 5, 0. Some of you witnessed 32,000 something 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 for some reason, right? There we go. 0. Initialize it. Always initialize. Okay. We'll come back to this here in a second. Once I know how many books I have, I can say that num results is going to be count. And I can set up memory. So book star, can I call it books? Malik. Dot. Nope. Why? Because we already have something called books. Result. That sounds nice. Return the result. Call to Malik. Size of. What are you trying to allocate? Books. Right? How many of them do you want? Count. Again, why don't I play around with pointers? There's the result. What does that look like? Does that look right, especially if I get rid of white space? Star, star? Well, it'll probably compile. It'll probably work exactly like you want, but nope. Right? Don't play around with pointers if you don't have to. Only do it once when you have to. Right? All right, I've got my result, and I'll return my result. So let me label this. To communicate the resulting the size of the resulting array to the calling function. Set up memory, I'll label that as 3. Right? 4, iterate again through the books and add them if they are by the author. Well, I can go ahead and steal this code right here. I'll probably want another index variable, j, initialized to 0. Why? Because I'm no longer counting. What I'm doing is I'm saying the result sub j is equal to the ith book. Okay? Okay. Now I've got non-C code here. Help me out. How do I know if the ith book was written by a particular author? What defines an author, first of all? At least as far as our data goes. The author, okay. So could I do something like this? Dot author is equal to author. It'd be really nice if I could do something like that. Some languages allow you to do something like this. In C, can I do this with strings? I can do this with integers. I can do this with doubles even. But can I do this with strings? No. strcpy is what I would do with strings. Likewise, I can't use equals equals with a user-defined type because it says, okay, I know what an author is. An author is 2 strings and another structure called date. But I don't know how to compare them, right? Is there an author CMP function built in? Nope. But we can make one. Let's do it. Come over here. Right. So this is a comparator function that takes 2 authors and determines if they are equal based on whether or not the first name and the last name are the same. There we go. So what should I call this? Oh, okay, CMP author. I like that. Right? Okay. What should it return? Okay, like an integer, right? Because what does strcmp do? It returns something negative. If this thing comes first and this thing comes second, it returns something positive if they're out of order. It returns 0 if they're equal. Okay. What does it take? For now, we're going to say that it takes 2 authors. We're going to look at generalizing this after the exam. Const author star A and const author star B. It takes 2 authors by pointers. Okay. Now let's come over here and implement it. Okay. First of all, I'll look at the first name. Then I'll or I don't know. Herbert and Rowling. Who should come first? Herbert. Why? Alphabetical, right? Or lexicographical, right? So I'm going to compare their last name. strcmp, A's last name, and B's last name. Why am I using arrows now? Because I've got pointers to structures. Okay. Now, if the result is equal to 0, then they have the same last name, right? I already know that Herbert comes before Rowling because those are not the same last name. But if I've got 2 authors named Herbert, Brian Herbert and Frank Herbert, right? Brian and Frank. Brian is a real person. It's his son, right? So which one of those should come first? Brian or Frank? Brian, right? Because the same thing. You look at the last name. If they're the same, then you break ties by looking at the first name. And if I've got Frank Herbert and Frank Herbert, then they're equal, right? So if I have the same last name, compare the first name. Result is now equal to strcmp of A's first name, B's first name, and I will return the result. That's all I have to do. What if it was not 0? What if it was Herbert and Rowling? If it's not 0, then I've already made my determination. It returns something negative, right? They're in order. If it were Rowling, Herbert, then they're out of order, and it would have returned something positive. All I'm going to do over here is check to see if they're the same. In other words, if they are 0. CMP author. Strictly speaking, this is not a comparator. We'll discuss that later on. But there we go. I've got a function very similar to strcmp is also technically not a comparator. We'll talk about that why later on. But it has the same pattern. It returns something negative, positive, or 0 depending on the relative ordering of these things. If it's 0, that means that this book's author is the same thing as that author. Really convenient. Now I don't have to write a whole bunch of repeated code over and over again. I've got a function that tells me if they're equal or not. Okay? Let's come over here, and I think that's it. Let's make sure that it at least compiles, though. We can do at least that much. Oops. Declaration number results 79. Does anybody see what it is? 79. Oh, what did I forget? What type is num results? Just a star, so it should be an integer star. There we go. And I probably made the same mistake over here, right? Yep, because it was a cut and paste error. There we go. All right. Again, those warnings, you can ignore them for now, but we can't ignore that, right? Both of these, in fact, if it's going to complain about the first one, and it's going to complain about the second one right here. Why? What does CMP author expect? Author stars. What are these? Authors. How do I turn them into stars? Ampersand. Ampersand. Same mistake down here. Ampersand. Ampersand. And this should be good. There we go. Uh-oh. Oh, I misspelled it. Books. There we go. There we go. Yep, it all compiles now. So let's come over here to demo and make sure that it works. I want to get all of the books by Frank Herbert. So I need this function right here. Oops, demo. I need Frank's books. All right, there we go. That's going to return Frank's books in my library, which is going to be just books. How many books are there? Num books. Author, I need an author here. Question mark, question mark. Otherwise, I'll have an int num Frank books. Right. And I'll go ahead and pass that as a pointer. Right. And then, now we'll come back and fill in that question mark here, but I want to make sure that it works, so I'm going to go ahead and have a for loop to print out each book. For int I equals 0, I is less than num Frank's books. I plus plus. We're on a first name basis because he's dead. Printf book, print book, and you can't argue about it, right? Frank's books, Savai. There we go. All right. So now I need to make an author, right, that represents Frank Herbert. So this goes back to, well, if you built all this framework for books, you might have to do the same thing for authors. Create author, init author, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to go through that because we are pressed for time, but you would understand that it would be basically the same thing. Right? Granted, a lot of this stuff, once you've got your data model, a lot of this stuff is boilerplate. I need this, I need that, I need that. Once you've written it, though, it's smooth sailing, right? Because then you can reuse those functions all over the place. Lots of boilerplate code, unfortunately, but that's how things get done, right? You need a data model here. Now, what if tomorrow we came back and, oh, well, now books need also an ISBN. Well, we've got 90% of the framework already. All we have to do is go back and add support for an ISBN. ISBNs are how books are uniquely identified, right? Okay. All right, so I need an author here, quick and dirty, right? author A. Here's a trick, right? Is it first name, last name? First name, last name, date of birth. So here's a trick way of doing it. Frank, Herbert, and then date of birth is another structure. So 2 more curly brackets here, along with what's the order? Year, month, day. I have no idea when he was born. I don't really care, so I'll just go ahead and go 000. Right? Because that's not how we're finding the author. We're finding them based on their name. Okay? And now I can go ahead and get a pointer to A and pass that into the function so that it can do it. This is very, very limited in the way that you can do this. You can only do it when you declare it. You have to make sure, or Herbert, sorry, you have to make sure that it matches, right? But you can do something like this, okay? Just for a quick testing example, okay? Let's make sure that it compiles now. That still compiles. There we go. Come on, Frank's books. Oh, Frank's books needs to be a pointer. Num Frank's books. Num Frank's book. Num Frank book. Num Frank books. Num Frank's books. There we go. So is it S on the Frank or, come on. Oh, sorry, it is not a pointer. It expects a regular old author. I changed years there, sorry. What else? Is that it? Yeah, that's it. Neat. It all compiles. Now, if this works, how many books should there be? Find Herbert. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The entire Dune series. Uh-oh. No, 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 no. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Say what? I got 6. That worked. So what should I do at this point? We don't have enough time to actually do it. But yeah, hold on to that thought in a second. What tools should I bring to bear here? I wonder why. The first one works, right? There it is. Find, not sister, Herbert, right? The first one works, and the rest of them don't. So what kind of tools should I fire up in order to learn what's going on here? GDB. Right? When you run GDB and you set a breakpoint, say in this get all books authors, you'll come down line after line. Okay, well, I counted correctly. Each one of those was Frank's books. I set up the memory correctly. I came down here. What did I forget to do? J++. We don't have time to do it, otherwise that's what I would have done. Recompile everything from scratch. And A.out, now it works. Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, that's the second one. God of Emperor of Dune, that's the third one, right? Heretics of Dune, Chapter House Dune. Right. All by Frank. Right. There we go. Any questions? Yeah.
The original one, wasn't it returning Chapter House Dune first?
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just overwriting.
Oh, that's because it was overwriting the first one. Yeah, sorry. So J never incremented, so the first one got overwritten, the second one got overwritten, only the last one became the first one, the rest of them were null.
Okay.
Yeah, good observation. Right. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll take all this code and put it up on the notes along with everything else that we've done up to this point. Remember, your exam on Thursday.